libertarian free will would be incompatible, or it would be inconsistent with determinism and inconsistent with indeterminism. Okay, and so we might have reasons to think that's true via those arguments. Okay, but if you think about it like this: if you had an argument that was, and you thought it might be sound, right? And the conclusion was that you don't exist or something, right? I would consider that argument as a reductio, right? I would consider that I believe it's more true the fact that I do exist, right? So I believe it's more true that the conclusion is false, and I believe that one of the premises is true. So I have more reason to believe the conclusion is false than I do that the premises are true. One of the premises are true.
I mean, so what's that based on?
I look will the same. So it would just be. Say that again.
Wait, what is that based on? The fact that you would be like more inclined towards one rather than the other.
Say that what I'd be more inclined towards one than the other?
Yeah.
No, what I'm saying is that in order for, so let me see if I could put like this. I have good reasons to think that compatibilism is incoherent. Okay, and we could go through that. So compatibilism certainly off. Hold on one second. Let me get a glass of water if I'm going to talk for a minute.
I've got a slightly different objection. Why would that's okay. Why would a being whose goal is to maximize good and minimize bad take his perfectly good existence on his own and mess it all up with a universe that's full of bad?
Well, let's not get into that. That would be such a thing. So, sorry, I had to get a glass of water. So look, with respect to that reductio, I would just take the compatibility argument as a reductio, right? There's reasons to think that given those combinations of those two arguments that free will is incoherent. If it is incompatible with determinism and indeterminism, it's incoherent given that's a dichotomy.
Wait, why is it incompatible with indeterminism?
With incompatible with what?
You said, okay, what's incompatible with indeterminism?
Free will.
Yeah. So the idea is that when the issue of libertarian free will is pressed, there's actually no way to distinguish libertarian free will from indeterminism. Right, that's the main problem, right? The idea is that
that's the argument.
It's right. So I just don't understand. Also, I'd like to hear why you think compatible.
Listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying. Okay. So the determinism, okay, just means that a complete description of the laws of nature, or microphysical description of the laws of nature, and a complete description of the prior antecedent states. You would be able, if determinism were true, you'd be able to predict the future forever forward, and you'd be able to retrodict the past all the way back until one of those features broke down. That's how determinism is defined in the philosophical literature. Okay, and the argument that's against free will being compatible with determinism, i.e. the compatibilist position, is that you don't have control over the laws of nature, nor do you have control over the prior antecedent states of the world before you were born. And those are the very things that constitute all. And if you don't have any control over the prior antecedent states or the physical laws, and those are what determine your actions, then your actions are not up to you, that you do not have. Okay, and so that's an argument against compatible. And then there would be the argument that you spoke of, okay? And there are objections that are argument, right? It's going to be Harry Frankfurt counter examples, okay? Frankfurt counter examples, okay? And those have already been responded to by Peter Van Inwagen, okay? With he's only responding to the principle of all principles that you could hang that on, of which the Frankfurt counter examples don't respond to. Are you familiar with those arguments? If you want, I'll just boil your head on free will.
Yeah, you can go ahead and do that, but I just don't understand why it's like very important. Because you could just concede, like what I'm saying is the objection doesn't like require determinism to be true, right? We could just both agree that determinism is false, right? It doesn't really matter to me, right? But the idea is that the person who's not defending libertarian free will could easily just say, yeah, sure, things might be determined, or they might be indeterminate. You know, for all we know, it doesn't matter, right? But
No,
the point is,
what I'm saying is with the combination of those two arguments is what generates the compatibility problem, which is the reason why everyone thinks that free will is fucking incoherent. And
yeah,
what
that's
I was saying is I think that the conclusion are more likely false than the premises being true. So I've got more confidence in the falsity of the confidence of the truth of the premises. So I leave it as a reductive, okay?
Yeah, okay. So I'm just saying, I just don't understand how this like dodges like or avoids the object.
What I'm saying is
objection.
that gives you reasons to think that free will.
Well, look, someone could think that the compatibilist view is like false, right? Someone could think that, oh, you know, there's no such thing as agency, right? Or that we don't really have any sort of responsibility, even if determinism is true, right? Nor would they have to hold the view, right, that everything is 100% determined, right? The description you gave earlier about being
that's
able
incoherent on my view. That's incoherent. You need to be an agent, and in order to be an agent, you need to have normativity. You need to have intentions and the possibility to fail, none of which are possible under determinism. So no, that all of what you just said can't happen.
I don't know what you mean, but look, the idea is that you're not escaping the randomness any more than the person that I just described, right?
What I'm saying is I've acknowledged the argument that I've given, which we seem to no longer be talking about, hinges on whether or not free will is coherent. I've acknowledged that. I've told you that I think there might be reasons to even accept that free will is incoherent based on the compatibility argument, which is a combination of the consequence argument and the mind argument, okay? And I was thinking there's probably good reasons to think that. However, I take those combinations of those arguments as reductios, okay? And that would give me good reasons to think that free will is not incoherent, okay? Which gives me reason to want to throw that card in this argument. So that's my response. And if you want, we can get back to the actual argument.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, you could just take another route regarding God having free will and still being ultimately good, right? Presumably you think that God makes his own choices and he's not some sort of puppet, right? But nonetheless, he always does what's good, you know? So it just seems like in the case of the human...
He could do that, but he just wouldn't have the type of free will that would be like the type necessary for moral responsibility and shit like that. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be morally significant free will. Like in the literature, there's a difference between morally significant free will and not morally significant free will. And the type of free will you're describing would be not morally significant.
Like
so no one cares about.
I don't understand what the distinction between the types of free will is, but
you mean like the type of free will that God has is like not morally significant free will because God can't choose to do evil.
Right, exactly. So the type of free will you described is one where he doesn't have.
Look, I'm just saying that it seemed like the soul building or the greater good, right, in the defense.
Yes.
The idea there was that people needed some sort of self-determined, or the greater good was people having some sort of self-determination, right, and being allowed to make their own choices, right? That was really all.
That's an instrumental good. No, that's an instrumental good. The free will is not the greater good. That's an instrumental good. So in order to understand this, we have to make a division between intrinsic good and instrumental good. And so intrinsic good is good in and of itself. Instrumental good is good to achieve some. In the end, that it's seeking, the instrumental good is seeking to achieve is the intrinsic good, right? So the free will is the instrument that crafts the soul, and the developed soul is the great.
Okay, but no, but then I'm just gonna ask, why is it? So you think that's a logical requirement for you to have the instrumental good in order to be able to have the intrinsic good, right? Because you have to think that it's like it's logically impossible to have the intrinsic good then without the instrumental good, right? Because otherwise, I'm just gonna ask why.
Well, what I'm saying is that the instrumental good is necessary in achieving the greater good, but it's itself is not the greater, but it is necessary.
Okay, it is necessary.
Hmm.
So
Well,
here's now.
That doesn't make sense, I don't think. Because if it's necessary to have the greater good, then doesn't that mean God had to create? Because he had to create creatures with morally significant free will.
Yeah, that's my view. Yeah,
Right.
my view. That is my.
But okay, so you reject aseity? You don't think God is?
Well, I reject like certain types of conceptions of aseity. It would. Yeah.
And another thing is, right, if morally significant free will is better than just regular free will, but God doesn't have morally significant free will, then that seems like he's either not the greatest being, or morally significant free will actually isn't
Okay.
better than
I have a
regular.
response to that.
All right,
So the reason why is that we associate morally significant free will with praise and blame. You only achieve praise and blame for morally significant choice. If you didn't have the choice and it was all, then you wouldn't have
right. So
you wouldn't
God's
have those things.
praiseworthy. Then that's interesting.
No. Listen, listen. I have a response to that. God is praiseworthy, and the reason why is because the requirements for being praiseworthy are not the inverse of being blameworthy. And I can explain this to you through an argument of. So the idea is that.
But that's weird. So you can be praiseworthy even if there was no way you could have chosen without morally significant free will. You can be praiseworthy.
No. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying the exact opposite. Here, let me take a drink of water.
That you can't be praiseworthy, or you can.
Say that one more time, Vic.
That you cannot be praiseworthy without morally significant free will, or you can be praiseworthy without.
Correct.
You cannot.
The first one was correct.
Well, then God cannot be praiseworthy because he doesn't have morally significant.
No, he can. I'm going to explain to you, and I keep in mind that that's not meant to be completely precise, but I'll explain to you, and you'll see how it's meant to function. So the idea is that God, since he doesn't have morally significant free will, he wouldn't be praiseworthy, and that's what I said entails. But let me explain to you, it's not completely accurate of my position because I think that God is morally praiseworthy, right? But the reason why he's morally praiseworthy is because the conditions for being morally praiseworthy are not the inverse of being morally blameworthy. So let me see if I can explain. If you had morally significant free will, right, you can be blameworthy for the choice. However, if you have non-morally significant free will, there are certain instances in which you can still be praiseworthy. Let me give you an argument from analogy would be something like in common practice, in the natural language, in parlance and custom and whatever. It's natural in the natural speaking. It's not improper. Hold on. Sorry, it's not improper as if someone said, like, your child is very beautiful, or you're very beautiful. And like, let's say that they're not speaking of ways that you style your hair. Let's say they're talking about that you didn't have control over, or the baby you didn't have control over in that sense. People, if you were to key into those discussions, right, you would find out that people respond in a way where they accept the praise. Okay, but if it was not common, they would say something like, "What are you talking about? That seems strange," right? If someone tries to praise you for a situation in which you tripped, right, or blamed you for a situation in which you tripped, we would be like, "What the fuck," right? And see what I'm getting at?
But that just means that you don't need morally significant free will to be praiseworthy.
Right. There's alternate routes to being praiseworthy. Okay, but so the idea is that God's goodness is constituted by his built soul being constituted in that way, and he's praiseworthy for having that soul, even if he didn't have a morally significant choice. Okay, and that's what serves as that argument by analogy. It's proper to accept the praise. It's not crazy to accept that praise. So God is praiseworthy. Okay. And so I've been able to instill the distinction between us have morally significant, him not, still being praiseworthy, us still praised and blameworthy.
But then we could also be praiseworthy without having morally significant free will.
Correct. Well, look, here's the idea. Here's the idea. If you could be that way, but it would be, the idea is, and this is probably going to be controversial. It all hinges on whether you're crafted that way, or whether you're like constituted that way naturally. I probably think that's probably hinge of the entire argument, because the reason why I want to employ that, right, is because I want to make a distinction between God, the goodness being achieved through allowing those people to like, for example, I know this is sounding really jumbled because I object. You're on the feet of an interesting objection here. I'm trying to craft around it because it's difficult. So okay, so what I'm saying is, I want to create a scenario in which there's some kind of distinction, and so where I can preserve that. So I want to say that the distinction is in virtue of the fact that they were created and he had it inherently, or something like that. Because like that's the only distinction that I can actually show some significant difference in.
Vic, just out of curiosity, are you laughing at the meme?
At the meme? No. What's the meme?
Don't laugh at Shamos.
No, I'm just laughing at myself. I'm self-amusing myself.
Oh, I fucking hate Vic. Oh my god.
Like there's a lot of talk about this in the literature with respect to the disparity between praise and blame, and how it's able to accept praise. But that, I think Vic's objection is just like, if you agree that we can accept praise being that type of way, we get back to the original objection where God treated us in that way, and that kind of seems to undercut the idea that you need to right? It seems to undercut that, right? Which would be a massive problem.
Mm-hmm. Shamos, Vic
So I
told me before.
I think I understand your objection, and I think it's potent.
Right.
And
yeah. I mean, the basic idea is
like,
what's the relevant property between us and God that makes it such that it's better for him to not have morally significant free will, but it's better for us to have morally significant free will.
Yeah. And so, like I said, the only thing I could think of is the fact he had that inherently, or whatever we're going to have that, and we have that through his graces or something. And now I suppose now I need some type of analogy that I can show a parallel with why, like
earlier,
that.
Right. The thing is that earlier, in order to make sense of what it meant for God to be praiseworthy but not have morally significant free will, you appealed to a human having some kind of like genetic makeup that he wasn't responsible for, right? But now you're saying that humans actually can't be blameworthy or praiseworthy for things that they aren't responsible for, through morally significant free will. So then the analogy would just break down, right?
What I'm saying is it wouldn't be true that would be the reason, that would be different. So it'd have to be different, right?
I'm sorry?
Sorry, give me a second.
Only created beings need it.
Well, what I'm saying is he understands the distinction, but he wants something to motivate the idea, like God not constituting us in that way, or God constituting us that way, not having it inherently, somehow doesn't subvert that. So I would need some type of argument from analogy to motivate that. So I need to think.
Right, but it's going to be tricky because you're not going to be able to use humans in your analogy, because humans already conceptually don't have what you're claiming, right? Which is being praiseworthy for things that we're not, significantly responsible for, in virtue of the fact that we're created beings. So it's going to be hard for you to come up with some kind of analogy like that.
That's the problem. Yeah, that's a problem. So that it all. I mean, that right there doesn't work. So I mean, I'll have to. I think I could keep certain elements of it. You know, I think I could keep certain elements, but some of that's obviously. Yeah, it's been I know that there are responses to this, but it's just been a while since I've contacted the dialectic the Steep.
It's funny, this kind of started off with me and then it evolved into everyone just being here.
I think I can remember. I think I actually start to remember from the literature. It's something like, if he is the one that's responsible for instilling those properties in you, right? Then, like, hold on. Let me see if I can put this in a good way. Give me a second to think about how to put.
How much less loud am I today?
Oh, you're really quiet. Oh, he's loud?
No, he's a lot less loud.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was doing some vocal tracks on the song that I'm working on, and I forgot I turned the sensitivity down. I was hoping I wouldn't have to move it back up.
Is it a remix?
No, I'm doing another like rap rock.
I think it was
rap rock song.
Goodness applied
It's going to be
physical theory of reference or something.
kind of strange, right? Because the whole free will thing, it seems like there's no contradiction in God creating beings that didn't have morally significant free will, but rather just had, you know, his type of free will where they always did the good, right? And then there might be some problem with God creating beings with morally significant free will that like always did the evil or something, right? So the free will objection, the free will response is really just going to turn into one of the skeptical theist responses. Because just the fact alone that we have morally significant free will doesn't suddenly like make it compatible that there's so much evil.
Yeah, bite that bullet, Shamos. What's wrong with skeptical theism?
Well,
Oh,
like
fuck.
I think like so I would offer an like so I think that if you think that there are problems with skeptical theist responses, I think that that inferences with respect to that are good.
You're
And I
cutting
think
out.
oh shit, hold on. Okay, how about this?
Shamos, I want to hear you because I don't even understand your response. I want to hear you defend. I think you might be able to get to common ground for a brief second with your defense of skeptical theism.
So it's kind of the companions and guilt argument, right? So it's like saying something like, if you have that type of view that the inferences hold, and then that skeptical create that type of global skepticism or something like that, then it actually you can create a companions and guilt argument that it has for like science and scientific inquiry, right? And so, damn, this argument's super complex. It's something. It'd be basically the idea of the evidential problem of evil is something like
determination. Is that what you're talking about?
One more time.
You're going to companions and guilt it with underdetermination?
Well, that might be a way to think of it, but I think a better way. Well, maybe I don't know exactly what you mean by that. But so what I'm trying to say is that if you were to accept that that's a problem, the skeptical theist front, and it creates kind of a broad range of problems with like global skepticism or whatever, or even some type of like moral skepticism. Like some people think it's just contained in moral skepticism. If it actually has a problem with science. Like you're gonna have to have some very crazy views about science if that's true. So you talk. I'm thinking most people don't want to have those crazy views about science, so they give up the argument.
Right. So you gotta do like some kind of reductio for people who reject the scientific conclusion, or who reject the conclusion of science. But I think the problem is though, if they accept that position on science, right, and there's like no contradiction in having that position, but there is this like clear contradiction in skeptical theism, and it seems like they're still going to have the upper hand in that sort of argument, right? That's why I don't really like companions and guilt arguments, unless they pretty much reduce to like complete reductios, where they show that it entails a contradiction.
Well, it depends the which way you answer it. Like I agree that that's correct if you answer it one way, but if I were to present you with it and you'd be like, fuck, like man, I'm really kind of committed to that view of science, and this kind of destroys that. Now, my commitments to science are much more stronger than my.
No, I agree. To those people, sure, that's going to work. But to the person who's going to say,
yeah, okay, yes, yeah, you can rationally deny that. You can rationally deny it. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and they're just going to say, but look, there's a contradiction entailed by your position, right? My view might seem unintuitive or whatever, right? But there's no contradiction.
Yeah, but that's an argument. I mean, that has
no incoherence.
It is an argument.
That's why I'd like sort of devalue partners in crime objections, right? They're pretty much just two quoquays.
Yeah, I agree with you in a sense, and you're right about that. There's something fishy about why, like I employ them probably more than other people would, and people probably wouldn't like that in arguments, right? For obvious reasons, okay, that I can see. But the reason to reasoning that way, or sympathetic to reasoning that way, is because like the way that we reason when oh hey, that's a contradiction. Oh wait, contradictions can't be true. One of these premises can't be true because like that's a mechanism we use in rationality for self-correction. And so I'm saying like that I'm pretty well committed.
He's just getting worse. He's cutting out even worse now.
I mean, I could present the argument if you're interested, or maybe you kind of track where I'm going, where I would be going. But it has to do with the no-seum inference. It has to do with science.
Yeah,
contains a lot.
You can present the argument. This was just like a sort of meta argument, right? Like
yeah, you're saying like I'm pretty sure the argument's just going to get us to this point, and let's just talk about it from there. Like assuming that argument gets us to that point.
Yeah, exactly.
And then just simplify. Yeah, I understand. That's a better way to have the conversation. You're So ultimately, here's what you've already said, which I'm just going to agree with. You're going to say, granting that, Shamos, what happens is they have a view where they have to be extremely skeptical about the deliverances of science in a very broad, systematic way. However, it seems like you still lose in the exchange, right? Because you're a global skeptic. They're just skeptic with respect to that inner, and that seems like you lose with respect to. Is that kind of your opinion of where we're at?
Well, if that's the conclusion of the argument, then yeah, I can say even if that argument goes through, that's where we would be, right?
Yeah, and so I'm seeking for the people to not want to have those views of science, right? So I'm seeking to fork those people. Like that's the response that I have, right? So what I'm saying is like
the people who you're gonna fork there, they're just going to be committed to the same thing you are. Or rather, all of those people, they're not going to...
Yeah, in a more narrow sense, yeah. They're a subset of what I contain.
Yeah. And then those people are also... Right, so there's going to be three positions, right? Or rather, you're still constructing like this sort of disjunction between these two positions. One where the people that have your position, and then the people that have they accept the entailment of whatever argument you have, right? But then the people who don't accept it,
I've lost.
They're just going to be at a better they're going to have a better
And
position for both of the you
and they might even be motivated virtue of that to play that card. Like they might even be motivated just to play that card in virtue of.
Yeah. Right. That's all that I really have to say about partners in crime stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'm just hoping people don't want to do, like, a lot of people don't want to have those. And like and if they want to bite that bullet, then I'm in a lot of trouble.
Well, but I'm saying, even if the people that you're talking against don't bite the bullet, right? They could end up agreeing with you. But then you still have this theoretical person that does bite the bullet, right? And he's going to have a better position than both of you, right? Because you're by his lights or whatever. Yeah, by his lights, he's just going to show that you two are holding to contradictions. Because it's kind of like saying, yeah, sure.
It's not a contradiction. And that's what I disagree with. Skeptical theism isn't a contradiction.
Well, I think
skeptical theism is
incoherent. So
no, I don't agree with that. I actually think that analysis is a straightforward fallacy. Because
you think global skepticism isn't incoherent?
No, what I'm saying is, I don't think global skepticism is. Yeah, I don't think it's a contradiction.
Well, I think it's incoherent. We can talk about that later, but
like, for example, what I'm saying is, like, think about the skeptical, like Stephen Law's response. You know, something like Pandora's box. Like, the whole idea is that world could exist, right? And so, like, it's like Stephen Law has already granted that world could exist. And so the idea is, it's not a contradiction. That world exists. That world can't be a contradiction. Contradictions can't exist.
Oh, so Vic,
Stephen
you
Law,
recant your claim? Yeah. So now you're just saying it's you don't understand it now, but do you recant your claim that there's a contradiction, Vic?
No, I think there would be a contradiction, but
what's
I'm
the
not
contradiction?
Sure.
What's the contradiction?
In global skepticism?
Yeah.
But you're skeptical.
Well, I don't think.
Well, no, like, that's my argument, because my argument was meant to motivate against that. So just have them address my argument.
So if global skepticism entails that most of somebody's beliefs could be false, then I think that's incoherent, because I think it's
I've undercut that.
Conceptually necessary that most of your beliefs aren't false.
Wait,
that's only conceptually necessary for interpretation. That's only conceptually necessary for interpretation.
There's no possible world in which somebody has mostly false beliefs. I don't understand what you're saying.
No,
exactly.
It's conceptually necessary, but only for proper interpretation. It's not conceptually necessary for them to exist. And so what I'm saying is, the whole idea, Vic, is that Stephen Law, via Pandora's box, agrees that if you're a skeptical theist, then there's a world in which God could deceive you systematically, and in which all of your because of your acceptance of that inference, you'd have to agree that he could possibly be systematically deceiving you. Therefore, you'd have to be a global skeptic. But the idea, that argument presupposes that there's a possible world in which God could do that. And if there's a possible world in which God could do that, that's not contradictory.
So I think there's a number of issues there, right? Like, first of all, Stephen Law could just be saying that by your lights, this is a possible world, right? But he doesn't have to think that it's a possible world simplicator, right? That could be the way he runs the argument. But I think if he does think it's a possible world simplicator, then that's just incoherent, right? And
so you're saying that there's no possible world in which a God has raised up deceived beings into believing that Christianity is true when it's not, and believe the moral bullshit when it's not true.
No, I'm saying they couldn't have mostly false beliefs.
No, what I'm asking you is, so never mind. You did answer that. You think that could not obtain.
Yeah, there could never be an agent with mostly false beliefs.
Okay, so and so what you're saying is, like, something, and you're going to make an argument from constituency, right? You're going to say something like agency is constitutive of having those type of mostly true beliefs, or some bullshit.
Yeah, like there's going to be interpretability, right, because of the public language, and a given interpretability for every false belief, there's going to be a background of true beliefs, right, etc. So there's going to be
Pandora's box doesn't entail that the God that could be deceiving you is deceiving you about most of your beliefs.
Well, if you say he could be deceiving you, then that means there's a possible world in which he is deceiving you.
Right? No, he could be deceiving you, so you're not justified in believing things like the sun will rise tomorrow.
Right,
That doesn't mean that your belief. That doesn't mean that the God is deceiving you, right? It doesn't mean that God is deceiving you that the sun will rise tomorrow.
But look, if he could be deceiving you, then there's a possible world in which he's deceiving you. Right?
Oh yeah,
No, he could be
yeah, he's
deceiving
right.
you about
That's
some of your
that's not
beliefs, not
epistemic.
most of them.
He's casting it out in a possible world epistemic. He's right. Yeah, I mean, so like we would have to get into like in order for you to motivate that response, you'd have to say, well, these things are constitutive, and then we'd have to just like engage in like a conceptual analysis to find out like our conception of agency is or like has to be like biconditional with that, with mostly true beliefs.
Right.
I agree with you on the interpretation. Like you have to ascribe more true beliefs than false beliefs for the person to be interpreted with respect to like conceptual schemes. But like, so what's the argument to like get more force to widen the scope, like to what you're talking about?
What's the argument to widen the scope from moral skepticism to global skepticism, or what do you mean?
Well, like, let me see if I can ask it a different way. Like, so the idea is something like, let's say there's a certain point where we start to acquire beliefs. Like, let's just assume that's the default understanding. Like, at one point we started forming beliefs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just entail, like, necessarily the child, as it started having beliefs, it wouldn't be an agent. It would have beliefs and desires, right? But it wouldn't be an agent if it had desires, but the beliefs were mostly false. I mean, not mostly false, or all false, or something like that. Like that baby couldn't an agent or something like that.
Yeah, he just couldn't have mostly false beliefs because he couldn't have beliefs at all. In order to have beliefs, they have to be interpretable, and you can't interpret an agent with mostly false beliefs.
Wait,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Let's ask a question. Global skepticism doesn't mean that you can't know, like, that logically incoherent things can exist, right? So when they try to run Pandora's box on a skeptical theist, the skeptical theist would say, well, look, I don't know which beliefs. Yeah, God could be deceiving me about some beliefs, but not most of my beliefs, because Vic said that would be logically incoherent. So I can know that he's not deceiving me about most of my beliefs. I just don't know which ones they are. He is.
But that would just undermine skeptical theism then.
Yeah, did I get him, Shamos? Did you see that?
No,
I think that I think what he's saying is it would undermine skeptical theism. So you would only preserve like a partial notion.
I'm not sure it undermines skeptical theism though, Vic, right? Because for any given belief, right, you're not going to be able.
Jack's got to jump in and white knight for Vic now.
You're not going to be able to offer a justification for that belief. Right?
Yeah, Vic cucked by God.
Well, you can't. What do you mean?
Vic, why do you need Jack to white knight for you?
What are you talking about? You can't offer a justification for it,
So if you say, right, I believe it's going to rain tomorrow, right? You can't say these are my justifications, X, Y, Z, for believing that it'll rain tomorrow, right? Because that would violate skeptical theism.
So you're just saying you couldn't be justified in any of your beliefs?
Well, I'm just saying that whether it's the case, right, let's say the Davidsonian argument is correct, right? And you can't have mostly false beliefs.
Right.
It doesn't follow, though, that it doesn't seem to me to follow that skeptical theism is undermined, because for any given belief, right, if you're asked to provide a justification for it, you'd be contradicting skeptical theism.
Well, right. Well, but that's weird though, right? Because the way to construe justification in any particular context is just like a shared belief that two people have, right? And then from that belief, he's inferring, this other belief.
No, but the point is, right, let's say you say, I think it's going to rain tomorrow because meteorologists, are reliable, right? and they say it's going to rain tomorrow, right? Well, that just contradicts skeptical theism, right? Because on skeptical theism, you're saying that God has more reason to permit meteorologists to be reliable than not.
Yeah,
Right.
so the skeptical theist
And
can't be
that's
justified in
just
believing that. But the thing is that Vic said there's a contradiction, Jack. Do you think there's a contradiction, or does it just entail that you're not justified in
well,
believing anything?
the contradiction that Vic was saying there is that given Davidson's argument, it's not possible for there to be a world where there's an agent that has mostly false beliefs.
Yeah, but so that's impossible. Like that's logically incoherent. But so the skeptical theist could just say, "Well, yeah, I don't know if it's going to rain tomorrow. I don't know if that's one of the less than half of false beliefs I have, but it's
Oh man,
impossible."
I have a good argument. I have a good argument, an intuitive argument against this.
It doesn't
Agent right now.
matter, right? The point is that for any given belief, if we ask what justifies that belief, any justification that's given is going to contradict skeptical theism. Right, Vic?
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a
So I don't
question?
think it's undermined.
Well, I was just
Okay,
but
maybe not. Maybe not.
But doesn't global skepticism just entail that there's a possible world in which all of your beliefs or most of your beliefs are false?
Maybe.
Yeah. So if it entailed that, then it would just entail a contradiction.
Well,
there's an analysis where that can be interpreted as the fallacy fallacy.
Right. That when we say we're skeptical theists, what we're saying is that we do not have access to the reasons that justify God's conduct, right? And so anytime we make any claim, right, which we think is a justified claim, we're contradicting that thesis.
Right, but then the claim itself that that like I have mostly true beliefs or something.
Now you see that snicker there. You see what that snicker there is that Vic is planning. The words that are going to follow the snicker are going to be some kind of high-level trolling. But go ahead, Vic.
Well, it might actually be a high-level troll. I don't know, but
Mike,
can I ask a question?
Yeah. Oh shit. Oh fuck.
Dan Vic.
Vic, run, Vic, run.
Like Jack, let me ask you a question about that idea. Let's assume an agent or whatever, he has, mostly true beliefs or something and desires and whatever those type of things that you think are constituent of agency. And then let's say the only beliefs that he has are beliefs about or facts that in the future are going to change, right? And so let's say that those facts are now false. They're no longer true. So now he's no longer an agent on your view. So like his agency switches on and off with respect to the world.
Here's another way, right? What if we just take Plantinga's way to what one of his moves in the EAN is that because EAN entails that you don't have reliable cognitive faculties, that therefore it's a defeater for naturalism itself, right? Or skeptical. So you could say because skeptical theism entails that, global skepticism, then that's a defeater for skeptical theism, right? So it'll just be self-defeating. That's like another way to sort of look at it, I guess.
Yeah, that's the idea. But yeah, behind like Pandora's box, that's like the threat.
Well, I think that's more or less the same objection, isn't it, Vic?
Yeah, I know, but I was just like rewording it to make it easier.
Okay.
I think that's a short way to put it. That's pretty.
Right. Well, that's what you were claiming at the outset, Vic.
Yeah. So global skepticism is always going to be a contradiction.
Well, look, the idea is that on Plantinga's view, it's not a contradiction. contradiction. So it's just that it's he says it's self-referentially incoherent. But it's if what you mean by a contradiction is like they both couldn't exist, then yeah, that's what he means.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But the idea is like, hold on, let's just be clear. It's not that they both couldn't exist simultaneously. It's just that if you believe those things, then you the beliefs themselves. So they undercut the beliefs themselves. So I don't know if that's really incoherent. I don't know if that's in the same way where like no possible world of such like could exist. Incoherent. It's been law actually speaks about this in this discussion where it's not meant to be that some contradiction or that because there's a contradiction it's false. Like the argument is not that strong. So now I think I disagree with you. I think his argument doesn't entail a contradiction.
It just entails that they have a defeater for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like Plantinga himself doesn't even agree that it entails a contradiction. Like he doesn't think it entails a contradiction, thus it's false. Like the conclusion of the argument isn't the or naturalism is false. The conclusion of the argument is okay. All right, we're on the same page. I don't think you can use Plantinga as an analogy to motivate like a parody.
So that doesn't actually show that there's a contradiction, which is what I was claiming earlier.
Yeah, right.
Well, the thing I was saying was if skeptical theism entails that you could be deceived about most of your beliefs, then that would be contradictory, right?
Oh, well, let me say something really quick. Remember when I fallacy? What you were doing there by assuming that was a contradiction and thus false would be the fallacy. Like what that move that you played right there would be the fallacy. Like that's a formal fallacy right there.
What's the formal fallacy?
So what you were doing is you understand that it's not incoherent. Like we agree that things that are logically incoherent are necessarily false. And so so the idea of the fallacy is to think that some premise between the argument is fallacious, right? Or it doesn't follow or can't be reasoned to or whatever, thus it's false, right? And that's what you were trying to say.
Wait, when did I say that?
Well, like I took that as what your objection was, that it was actually a contradiction, that thing itself was that it was false.
Well, yeah. No, I'm saying it's a contradiction for there to be an agent with mostly false beliefs. That just doesn't mean anything because constitutive of agency is you have mostly true beliefs because of things like interpretability. And therefore, if skeptical theism or any form of global skepticism entails that possibly you have mostly false beliefs, then it would entail a contradiction.
So let me ask you a question. On your view, if one person existed, he couldn't be an agent. He would need another person to be, in principle, able to interpret him and for him to have agency. So
I don't
single person,
because it's a modal.
Or you would just cast out counterfactually, like he would be able. Okay. Yeah. Okay. My bad. I made a mistake. Yeah, I think that was a fairly decent discussion. Yeah.
I can stop recording now, right? Are you guys done? Or are you guys gonna pick this back up? Yeah, I'll just stop recording now.
All right.